Imagine this. A single dad, soaked to the bone, running through a storm for the one job that could change his daughter's life. And then he sees her. An old woman, collapsed on the sidewalk, blood on her hand, while the whole world steps around her like she's invisible. He has 15 minutes to make the interview. 15 minutes to escape 5 years of poverty. But what he does next will cost him everything, or give him more than he ever dreamed. Stay till the end, because the twist will leave you speechless. Rain hammered the sidewalk like 1,000 tiny fists. Derek Callahan sprinted through the downpour, clutching a folder of documents against his chest. His only shot at escaping 5 years of poverty. One interview, one chance. His 7-year-old daughter was counting on him to finally keep his promise. Then he saw her. An elderly woman crumpled on the wet concrete, her white hair plastered to her face. Blood trickling from her palm. Dozens of polished shoes stepped around her. Not one person stopped. Derek's legs froze. The office building loomed just 2 blocks away. 15 minutes until his interview. He could still make it. He could pretend he didn't see. But his hands were already reaching for her. He didn't know that decision would cost him everything he fought for. He didn't know the trembling woman he lifted from the rain had a daughter too. One who sat in the corner office of the very building he'd never reach. What happens when a man chooses kindness over survival? Derek Callahan woke up at 4:30 that morning, long before the sun thought about climbing over the rooftops of Cedar Heights. The apartment was cold, the heating system having given up sometime around February, and he could see his breath hanging in the gray air as he sat on the edge of his mattress. The floor creaked beneath his feet as he moved toward the bathroom, careful not to wake Rosie sleeping in the next room. Her door was slightly open, the way she liked it, and he could hear the soft rhythm of her breathing, the most peaceful sound in his world. The mirror showed him a man who had aged 10 years in the last 5. 34 years old, but the lines around his eyes told a different story. His hands, rough and callous from years of construction work, gripped the sink as he stared at his reflection. Today was different. Today, everything could change. He had circled this date on the calendar 3 weeks ago. The red ink now faded, but the hope still burning bright. Web Construction was hiring. Not just any position, a permanent role with benefits, health insurance, paid vacation, things that sounded like fairy tales to a man who had been picking up day jobs for half a decade. He had submitted his application on a whim, never expecting a call back. When the phone rang last Tuesday, he had answered with cement dust still coating his throat. And the woman on the other end had said the words that made his knees weak. "We'd like you to come in for an interview." Derek dressed carefully in the only suit he owned, a charcoal gray number he had bought at a thrift store for his brother's wedding 8 years ago. The sleeves were slightly too short now, his wrist showing when he reached forward, but it was clean and pressed. He had spent an hour the night before with the iron, making sure every crease was perfect. This suit had to carry him into a new life. Rosie's lunch was already packed in the refrigerator. A peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and the last of the crackers. He left a note on the kitchen table. "Mrs. Patterson will walk you to school. I'll pick you up at 3. Love you more than all the stars. Daddy." It was the same thing he wrote every time he had to leave before she woke. And he knew she would trace the words with her finger before folding the paper into her pocket. The bus stop was 3 blocks away. And Derek walked fast, his folder of documents tucked inside his jacket to keep them dry. The sky was the color of bruises, purple and gray swirling together like a warning. He had checked the weather forecast the night before. 60% chance of rain. He should have brought an umbrella. He didn't own one. The bus arrived 7 minutes late, which meant Derek arrived downtown 15 minutes behind schedule. He checked his watch obsessively, calculating and recalculating the walk to Web Construction headquarters. The building was on Madison Avenue, 12 blocks from the bus terminal. He could make it in 18 minutes if he walked fast. His interview was at 9. It was 8:27. The first drops of rain hit the pavement just as Derek turned onto 5th Street. Light at first, almost gentle, like the sky was testing his resolve. Then the clouds opened up without warning, and suddenly the world became a wall of water. Derek ducked under an awning, his heart pounding. The folder. He had to protect the folder. Inside were his references, his certifications, the letter of recommendation from his old foreman, everything that proved he was more than just a pair of hands. He waited 2 minutes, 3, watching the rain cascade down in sheets. The awning was leaking, a steady stream of water finding its way down the back of his collar. His suit was getting damp. 8:31. He couldn't wait any longer. Derek stepped into the rain and started running. The world blurred around him, all gray and silver, and the sound of water beating against concrete. His shoes, the good leather ones he had polished that morning, splashed through puddles that were forming faster than the drains could handle. The folder stayed pressed against his chest, his jacket wrapped around it like armor. 4 blocks, 3 blocks. He could see the web construction building now, a tower of glass and steel reaching toward the storm clouds. 2 blocks. That's when he saw her. At first, she was just a shape in the rain. Something crumpled on the sidewalk near a closed storefront. His mind, focused on the interview, on Rosie, on the future, almost dismissed it. A pile of clothes, a forgotten bag. But then the shape moved just slightly, and Derek's steps faltered. An old woman. She was lying on her side, one hand pressed against the wet concrete, trying to push herself up and failing. Her white hair had come loose from whatever pins had held it, plastered against her face like seaweed. Her coat, expensive, he noticed even in the chaos, was soaked through, and there was blood. Not much, but enough. A cut on her palm, red mixing with rainwater, swirling away toward the gutter. People walked past her. A man in a business suit, phone pressed to his ear, stepped around her without breaking stride. A young woman with an umbrella glanced down, then looked away, quickening her pace. An older couple, huddled together under a shared raincoat, crossed to the other side of the street. Derek stopped. His watch said 8:39. The web construction building was right there. He could see the revolving doors, the warm golden light inside. The security guard standing by the reception desk. 21 minutes until his interview. He could still make it. The old woman tried to stand again and collapsed. Something in Derek's chest cracked open. He thought of his mother, gone 6 years now, and how she used to say that the measure of a person wasn't in what they achieved, but in what they chose to do when no one was watching. He thought of Rosie and what kind of father he wanted to be. Not just in words, but in the small, invisible moments that shaped a child's understanding of the world. He walked toward the fallen woman, the folder still pressed against his chest. She looked up as his shadow fell over her, and he saw fear flash in her eyes, the instinctive weariness of someone who had learned that not all help was helpful. "Ma'am." Derek crouched down, keeping his voice gentle. "Are you hurt? Can you move?" Her eyes, a faded blue that must have been striking once, searched his face. "I fell," she said, and her voice was embarrassed, frustrated. "These shoes, the rain. I don't know what happened. Let me help you up." He set his folder down on the wet pavement. There was no choice now, nowhere dry to put it, and reached for her hands. Her skin was cold, her grip weak, but determined. Slowly, carefully, he lifted her to her feet. She swayed and he held on. "Your hand is bleeding," Derek said. "We need to get you somewhere dry, get that looked at." "I'm fine." But she wasn't. He could see her trembling, see the way she favored her left ankle. "I just need to catch my breath." Derek looked at his watch. 8:43. 17 minutes. The building was right there. He could walk her to the door, hand her off to the security guard, and still make it. He could still save the interview. "Can you walk?" he asked. She took one step and winced, grabbing his arm. "I think I twisted something." Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. The rain showed no signs of stopping. Derek felt the weight of 5 years pressing down on him. The missed opportunities, the scraped-together rent payments, the look on Rosie's face when he told her they couldn't afford the field trip fee. He felt it all. And he made his choice. There's a hospital 3 blocks east, he said. I'm going to take you there. No, no. She shook her head. You're going somewhere. I saw you running. You have somewhere to be. It can wait. The lie tasted bitter, but he said it anyway. Let's get you out of the rain. The walk to St. Mary's Hospital took 23 minutes. It should have taken 10, but Florence, she told him her name somewhere between 2nd Street and Oak Avenue, could barely put weight on her left foot. Derek held her arm, matching his pace to hers, ignoring the rain that had soaked through every layer of his clothing. His folder was ruined. He had picked it up from the puddle, but the water had found its way inside, turning his carefully printed documents into smeared ghosts of themselves. At the hospital entrance, the automatic doors slid open and released a wave of warm antiseptic air. A nurse looked up from the reception desk, took in the sight of the elderly woman with blood on her hand and the drenched man supporting her, and immediately moved toward them. What happened here? She fell, Derek said. About 20 minutes ago. Her hand is cut, and she may have twisted her ankle. The nurse guided Florence to a wheelchair while Derek stood there, water pooling beneath his shoes. Florence reached out and grabbed his wrist. Thank you, she said. I never asked your name. Derek. Derek Callahan. Derek. She said it slowly, like she was filing it away somewhere important. You're a good man, Derek Callahan. Don't let anyone tell you different. He smiled, and it felt foreign on his face, genuine despite everything. You take care of yourself, ma'am. He stayed until she was wheeled through the double doors toward the examination rooms. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed the number he had memorized, the one printed at the bottom of the interview invitation. Web construction. How may I direct your call? Yes, hello? His voice sounded strange in his own ears, too casual, too desperate. My name is Derek Callahan. I had an interview scheduled for 9 this morning and there was an emergency. A woman fell in the rain and I had to help her. I was wondering if there's any possibility of rescheduling. A pause. The clicking of keyboard keys. I'm sorry, Mr. Callahan. The interview slots for today are fully booked, and we have no availability for rescheduling this week. If you'd like to leave your information, we can contact you if another opening becomes available. Please, I just need 10 minutes. I can be there in. I'm sorry, sir. Our policy is very clear. Missing an interview without 24 hours notice removes you from consideration. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Derek stood in the hospital lobby, dripping water onto the linoleum floor, and felt something inside him collapse. No, he said quietly. Thank you for your time. The bus ride home was the longest of his life. He sat in the back, his ruined folder on his lap, watching the city pass by through rain-streaked windows. 5 years. 5 years of hoping, of working, of promising Rosie that things would get better. And he had thrown it all away for a stranger. No, not thrown away. Chosen to let go. The apartment was empty when he got home. Mrs. Patterson had already taken Rosie to school. Derek stripped off his wet clothes, hung them over the shower rod, and stood under hot water until his skin turned red. The suit was probably ruined. Another thing he couldn't afford to replace. He picked Rosie up at 3, just like he promised. She ran to him across the schoolyard, her backpack bouncing, her gap-toothed smile brighter than anything the sun could offer. Daddy, did you get the job? Derek knelt down, pulling her into his arms. She smelled like chalk and apple juice and the particular sweetness of childhood. Not this time, sweetheart. Oh. Her face fell, but only for a moment. That's okay. You'll get the next one. You're the best worker in the whole world. He held her tighter, feeling the familiar sting behind his eyes. Thanks, Rosie. I love you more than all the stars. I know, Daddy. I love you more than all the galaxies. The days that followed settled into their usual rhythm of struggle and survival. Derek found work at a construction site across town. Day labor, no benefits, cash under the table. He left before dawn and came home after dark, his body aching in ways that made him feel ancient. Rosie spent afternoons with Mrs. Patterson, the elderly widow next door who charged nothing but company and the occasional home-cooked meal. At night, Derek lay awake and wondered about the woman from the rain. Florence. He hoped her hand had healed, that her ankle hadn't been seriously damaged. He hoped she had someone to take care of her. Family, friends, anyone. He would never know. That was the nature of kindness between strangers. You gave what you could and trusted the universe to carry it forward. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. The weather turned cold and Derek started doubling up on socks to keep his feet warm on the early morning walks to the bus stop. Rosie needed new shoes. She was growing so fast. But new shoes meant choosing between electricity and groceries. He chose groceries. He always chose groceries. One evening, while Rosie was doing homework at the kitchen table and Derek was inventorying the refrigerator, trying to figure out how to make 4 eggs and half a loaf of bread last 3 days, there was a knock at the door. Derek frowned. Mrs. Patterson usually just called through the wall if she needed something. The landlord wasn't due for another week. He approached the door carefully. Years of living in Cedar Heights had taught him that unexpected visitors rarely brought good news. The man on the other side was young, maybe late 20s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Derek's monthly rent. His shoes were shined to a mirror finish, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had never wondered where his next meal was coming from. "Mr. Callahan? Derek Callahan? Who's asking?" The young man smiled, the kind of practiced smile that came from countless professional interactions. "My name is Raymond Foster. I'm the executive assistant to Catherine Webb, CEO of Webb Construction. Ms. Webb would like to speak with you. Would you be available to come with me?" Derek blinked. The name registered slowly. Webb Construction. The interview he'd missed. The opportunity that had slipped through his fingers like rainwater. "I don't understand. I missed the interview. They told me I was removed from consideration." Raymond's smile didn't waver. "Ms. Webb is aware of the circumstances. She would still like to speak with you if you're willing. I have a car waiting downstairs." "Daddy?" Rosie appeared beside him, her pencil still in hand. "Who's that?" Derek looked at his daughter, then at the stranger in the expensive suit, then back at his daughter. None of this made sense, but then again, he had learned a long time ago that life rarely did. "Rosie, go finish your homework. I'll be right back." He hesitated. "Actually, Mrs. Patterson, can you watch her for an hour?" 20 minutes later, Derek was sitting in the back of a black sedan that probably cost more than everything he had ever owned combined. Raymond drove in silence, navigating the city streets with practiced ease. The buildings grew taller, the streets cleaner, the people on the sidewalks better dressed. They were heading toward the financial district, toward the glass and steel tower he had been running toward in the rain 3 weeks ago. The Webb Construction lobby was exactly as impressive as he had imagined. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, a waterfall feature that probably cost more to maintain than his annual income. Security guards in crisp uniforms nodded at Raymond as they passed. Employees in business attire moved with purpose, all of them looking like they belonged in this world of chrome and polished stone. Derek did not belong here. He knew it in his bones, in the way his work boots left faint marks on the marble, in the way his calloused hands felt rough against the elevator's polished buttons. He was a construction worker from Cedar Heights, a single father who couldn't afford new shoes for his daughter, a man who had missed his one chance at a better life. The elevator climbed 32 floors. When the doors opened, Raymond gestured toward a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the entire city. "Ms. Webb is expecting you." Catherine Webb was not what Derek had expected. She was younger than he had imagined, maybe late 40s, with sharp eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a no-nonsense style. She stood as he entered, and he noticed she was tall, almost his height, with the kind of posture that suggested years of commanding rooms full of people who underestimated her. "Mr. Callahan." She extended her hand, and her grip was firm, professional. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. Please sit." The office was smaller than he had expected, functional rather than showy, with blueprints spread across a drafting table and construction helmets lined up on a shelf. This was a woman who still got her hands dirty, he realized. A woman who hadn't forgotten where she came from. Ms. Webb, I appreciate the invitation, but I have to be honest. I don't understand why I'm here. I missed the interview. I know your policies. Yes, you did miss the interview. She sat across from him, her eyes never leaving his face. Do you remember why? Derek's throat tightened. There was a woman. She fell in the rain. I couldn't just walk past her. No. Catherine's voice softened just slightly. No, you couldn't. She pressed a button on her desk phone. Send her in. The office door opened and Derek's heart stopped. Florence. The elderly woman from the rain walked into the room with only a slight limp, her white hair now neatly styled, her hand bearing only a small bandage where the cut had been. She was dressed elegantly, expensively, with pearls at her throat and diamonds on her fingers. But her eyes, those faded blue eyes, were the same ones that had searched his face in the downpour 3 weeks ago. Derek, she said his name like a blessing. I told you I'd remember. He rose from his chair, his mind struggling to connect the pieces. The old woman in the rain. The corner office of Webb Construction. Catherine Webb. Mr. Callahan. Catherine's voice drew his attention back. I'd like you to meet my mother, Florence Webb. 3 weeks ago, she was on her way to surprise me for my birthday when she fell on Madison Avenue. By the time she managed to call me, she was already in the hospital, brought there by a stranger who gave up his own appointment to make sure she was safe. Derek shook his head slowly. I didn't know. I had no idea who she was. I know. Catherine leaned forward and for the first time he saw something in her expression that went beyond professional interest. That's exactly the point. You didn't know she was my mother. You didn't know there might be something in it for you. You saw an old woman in trouble and you chose to help her, even though it cost you something you desperately needed. Florence moved toward him, taking his hand in both of hers. I told Catherine everything. How you carried my weight for 3 blocks in the pouring rain. How you stayed with me until I was settled. How you never once complained or checked your watch or made me feel like I was an inconvenience. I called the number the next day, Derek said quietly. They told me I was removed from consideration. Our HR department followed protocol, Catherine said. They didn't have the full story. I didn't have the full story until my mother got home and couldn't stop talking about the man who saved her. She described you, your face, your voice, the way you spoke to her. She told me you said something about an interview that could wait. It couldn't wait. The words came out before Derek could stop them. It was the most important interview of my life. It couldn't matter more than helping her. The room was silent for a long moment. Outside the windows, the city sparkled under a clear autumn sky. The same city that had been drowning in rain the day Derek had made his choice. Catherine stood and walked to the window, her back to him. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful, measured. Do you know what I've spent 20 years building, Mr. Callahan? A company, a legacy, hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts, thousands of employees, projects that will stand for generations. And in all that time, I've learned one thing that matters more than anything else. She turned to face him. I can teach someone to read blueprints. I can train them to operate machinery, to manage budgets, to negotiate contracts. But I cannot teach someone to be decent. I cannot train someone to choose the right thing when the wrong thing is easier. That has to come from within. Florence squeezed Derek's hand. She's been looking for you for 3 weeks, dear. The hospital couldn't give out your information, and all they had was a name. Derek Callahan. Do you know how many Derek Callahans there are in this city? 47, Catherine said dryly. We contacted every single one. Derek felt something shift in his chest, something that had been clenched tight for years, held together by sheer willpower and desperation. I don't know what to say. Say you'll take the job. Catherine walked back to her desk, picked up a folder, and handed it to him. Not the position you interviewed for. Something better. I need people I can trust, Mr. Callahan, people who understand that how we treat others matters more than how much profit we generate. I'm offering you a position as a site supervisor at our downtown development project. Full benefits, health insurance for you and your daughter, and a salary that will let you stop worrying about whether you can afford groceries and electricity in the same month. Derek opened the folder. The numbers on the page blurred as his eyes filled with unexpected tears. It was 3 times what he had ever earned. It was stability. It was safety. It was everything he had dreamed of for Rosie. Why? His voice cracked. You don't know me. You don't know if I'm even qualified. I know enough. Catherine's voice was gentle now, the steel melted away. I know you put my mother's well-being above your own desperation. I know you stayed with her until she was safe, even though every minute cost you something precious. And I know that any man who can do that for a stranger will do 10 times more for a team that depends on him. Florence reached up and touched his cheek, her fingers cool and soft. You didn't just help me that day, Derek. You restored my faith in people. An old woman fallen in the rain and everyone just walked by. Everyone except you. Derek thought of Rosie, of the note he left every morning telling her he loved her more than all the stars, of the promises he had made and the ones he had been unable to keep. He thought of his mother's voice telling him that the measure of a person was in the choices they made when no one was watching. I'll take the job, he said. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you. Catherine smiled, a real smile, not the practiced one of a CEO, but the warm expression of a daughter who loved her mother. Thank me by being exactly who you already are, Mr. Callahan. That's all I ask. The first day at web construction felt like stepping into another universe. Derek arrived an hour early, his new work boots still stiff, his hard hat tucked under his arm. The downtown development project was massive, a 40-story mixed-use building that would transform an entire city block. Cranes stretched toward the sky like metal giants, and the sound of construction filled the air with a symphony of progress. His team consisted of 15 workers, men and women who had been doing this job for years and who looked at the new supervisor with the skepticism of people who had seen plenty of bosses come and go. Derek understood. He had been one of them not long ago. Day labor, no voice, no power. He knew what it felt like to be invisible. He gathered them together on that first morning, the autumn sun cutting through the construction dust. I'm Derek Callahan, he said, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. I know I'm new here, and I know you've probably got questions about who I am and why I'm standing in front of you. Here's what I can tell you. I've been where you are. I've done day jobs and picked up shifts and wondered if I was going to make rent. I'm not here to boss anyone around. I'm here to work alongside you, to make sure you get home safe every night, and to build something we can all be proud of. Silence. Then a grizzled man in the back, probably 20 years Derek's senior, spoke up. You work with your hands or you just talk pretty? Derek smiled. Give me a hammer and find out. He spent the first week proving himself, arriving before anyone else and leaving after everyone had gone. He learned names, learned stories, learned the rhythm of the site. He worked alongside his crew, hauling materials and operating machinery, showing them that the new supervisor's calluses weren't for show. The respect came slowly, earned in sweat and shared labor. By the end of the month, the grizzled man, whose name was Pete and who had been in construction since before Derek was born, clapped him on the shoulder and said, You're all right, Callahan. For a boss. It was the highest compliment Derek had ever received. Rosie flourished in ways Derek hadn't dared to hope. They moved to a new apartment, nothing fancy, but clean and warm, with a bedroom for each of them and heat that actually worked. She got new shoes, new clothes, a backpack that wasn't held together with duct tape. For her 8th birthday, Derek took her to the zoo, something she had been asking about for 2 years, and watched her face light up at the sight of the elephants. Daddy, she said, tugging at his sleeve. This is the best day ever. He knelt down beside her, looking at the enormous creatures ambling through their enclosure. Yeah, sweetheart. It really is. The health insurance kicked in just in time. Rosie had been complaining about headaches, and Derek had been ignoring his own persistent cough, both of them hoping the problems would just go away. They didn't. But now there were solutions. Doctor's visits, prescriptions, the simple, miraculous luxury of being able to say something's wrong and having the means to fix it. Derek kept in touch with Florence. Every Sunday afternoon, he and Rosie would visit her townhouse in the nice part of the city, a place filled with antique furniture and photographs of Catherine as a child. Florence had tea prepared and cookies and a seemingly endless supply of stories about the old days when she and her husband had started web construction with nothing but determination and a single pickup truck. "You remind me of him," she told Derek one afternoon while Rosie explored the garden outside. "Harold, my husband. He was a good man. Really good, in the way that matters. Not flashy about it. Not looking for credit. Just doing the right thing because it was right." "Thank you, ma'am." "Florence," he corrected himself. "That means a lot." She smiled. "And I'm not flattering you, Derek. I'm telling you the truth. That's something we old people are allowed to do, say exactly what we mean." He laughed, and she laughed with him. And outside the window, Rosie chased butterflies through the roses. At work, Derek discovered that he had a gift for understanding people. The construction knowledge came naturally, built on years of hands-on experience. But it was the human element that set him apart. He could sense when someone was struggling, could tell when a marriage was falling apart, or a worker was battling addiction. He didn't pry, didn't push. He just made it known that his door was always open, that help was available for those who wanted it. Word got around. Employees started requesting transfers to his team. The downtown project was ahead of schedule, under budget, with a safety record that made other sites look reckless. Catherine noticed. "You're doing good work," she told him during a site visit 6 months into his tenure. "Better than good. The board is impressed." "Thank you, Ms. Webb." "Catherine." She smiled, that same warm smile he remembered from the day she offered him the job. "We're past formalities at this point, don't you think?" He nodded, not quite able to voice the gratitude that threatened to overwhelm him. "How do you thank someone for changing everything?" "There's something else," Catherine continued. "We're expanding. New project in the Riverside district, bigger than this one. I need someone to lead it. Someone I can trust." "Absolutely." Derek's heart stuttered. "Are you?" "I'm offering you a promotion, Derek. Senior project manager. More responsibility, more visibility, more pay. You'd have 40 people reporting to you. A budget in the tens of millions. It's a big step." He thought of Rosie, of Florence, of the life that had seemed impossible just a year ago. "I'd be honored," he said. "But I need to ask, why me? There must be people who have been here longer, who have more experience." "There are," Catherine agreed. "But experience isn't everything. Neither is longevity. What matters most is character. And that's something you've demonstrated every single day since you walked through our doors." She paused, looking out over the construction site, the skeleton of the building rising against the sky. "My mother still talks about you, you know. Every time I see her, she asks how that wonderful young man is doing. She says you saved her life." "I just helped her up." "No." Catherine's voice was firm. "You did more than that. You showed her that kindness still exists. For someone her age, after everything she's seen, that's not nothing. That's everything." 1 year later, Derek stood on the observation deck of the completed downtown tower, looking out over a city that no longer felt like enemy territory. The building behind him was finished, 40 stories of glass and steel, housing offices and apartments and a community center on the ground floor. His team had built this. His hands had been part of every beam, every floor, every window that now caught the setting sun and turned it to gold. Rosie stood beside him, her hand in his, her face pressed against the protective barrier as she gazed at the world below. She was 8.5 now, tall for her age, with her mother's cheekbones and her father's stubborn streak. She had made the honor roll at her new school, had joined the softball team, had discovered a love for science that made Derek both proud and slightly intimidated. "Daddy," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Did you really build all this?" "Not by myself, sweetheart. A lot of people worked very hard to make this happen. But you were in charge. Part of it." "Yes." She turned to look at him, her eyes serious in a way that made her seem older than her years. "I'm proud of you, Daddy." The words hit him like a physical force, and he had to blink rapidly to keep his composure. All those years of struggle, all those nights of wondering if he was failing her. And here she was telling him she was proud, as if he had ever done anything to deserve such unconditional love. "I'm proud of you too, Rosie. More than you know." Behind them, the elevator doors opened and Florence emerged, supported by Catherine's arm. The old woman had grown frilier over the past year, but her eyes were still sharp, still full of the fire that had built an empire alongside her late husband. "There they are," Florence announced, her voice carrying across the observation deck. "My two favorite people in the whole world." Derek smiled, releasing Rosie's hand so she could run to embrace the woman she now called Grandma Flo. The nickname had started as a joke, but it had stuck, and Florence had adopted it with the fierce pride of someone who had waited a long time for grandchildren she never had. "The building looks beautiful," Catherine said, joining Derek by the railing. "You should be proud." "I am." He paused, watching Florence and Rosie laughing together, the old woman pointing out landmarks in the city below. "A year ago, I couldn't afford to buy my daughter new shoes. Now I'm standing on top of a building I helped create. It doesn't feel real sometimes." "That's the thing about life," Catherine said thoughtfully. "It changes when you least expect it. One moment you're running through the rain, terrified of being late. The next moment you're making a choice that alters everything." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stopped?" Derek asked. "If I just kept running, sometimes." Catherine's voice was quiet. "I wonder if my mother would have been okay. I wonder if someone else would have stopped. I wonder about all the parallel universes where you made a different choice. And I'm grateful we live in this one." She turned to face him fully, her expression earnest. "You didn't just save my mother that day, Derek. You reminded her, reminded both of us, that there are still people in this world who choose kindness over convenience, who sacrifice for strangers, who do the right thing even when it costs them everything." Derek shook his head slowly. "I didn't think of it as a sacrifice. I couldn't walk past her. I couldn't be the kind of person who walks past someone in need. That's exactly what I mean." Catherine smiled and it transformed her face from the stern CEO to something softer, more human. "That's who you are. Not because you thought it would benefit you, but because it's the only way you know how to be." Florence and Rosie approached, the old woman moving slowly but steadily, one hand on the little girl's shoulder for support. "Derek," Florence said, her voice warm with affection. "Do you know what day it is?" He checked his watch, confused. "Saturday. 1 year ago today." Florence reached out to take his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. 1 year ago, I fell in the rain and a stranger stopped to help me. 1 year ago, that stranger became family." Rosie tugged at Derek's sleeve. "Grandma Flo and I made you something, Daddy, for your anniversary." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket, construction paper covered in crayon drawings and glitter. Derek opened it carefully, revealing a childish but clearly heartfelt illustration. A man in the rain helping an old woman stand, with a rainbow arching overhead. Below the picture, in Rosie's careful handwriting, "My daddy is a hero because he helps people even when it's hard." Derek's vision blurred. He knelt down, pulling his daughter into his arms, burying his face in her hair so no one would see the tears streaming down his cheeks. "Thank you, sweetheart," he managed. "This is the best gift anyone has ever given me." "I told you, Daddy." Rosie's voice was matter-of-fact, the simple wisdom of childhood. "You're the best worker in the whole world and the best helper and the best daddy." He held her tighter, feeling Florence's hand on his shoulder, sensing Catherine's approving presence nearby. A year ago, he had been a desperate man running through the rain, clutching a folder full of dreams that seemed impossible. He had made a choice, a small choice really, just a few minutes out of a lifetime. And everything had changed. But here was the truth that Derek was only beginning to understand. He hadn't changed. He had simply been given the opportunity to show who he had been all along. The kindness that led him to stop for Florence wasn't new. It was the same kindness that made him leave notes for Rosie every morning. That made him share his lunch with coworkers who had forgotten theirs. That made him stop to help strangers on the street even when he had nothing to give but his time. He had thought that day in the rain that he was sacrificing his future for a stranger. He had thought he was giving up everything he had worked for, every hope he had harbored for Rosie's sake. But life, he was learning, didn't work that way. Sometimes the things that looked like losses were actually doors opening. Sometimes the moments that felt like failure were actually the universe rearranging itself to give you exactly what you deserved. Not because you expected it, not because you were trying to earn it, but because of who you chose to be when no one was watching. The sun continued to set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and pink. The four of them stood on the observation deck, a construction worker, a CO, an elderly woman, and a little girl, bound together by a single act of kindness on a rainy day. And somewhere below, the streets were full of people rushing past each other, eyes on their phones, minds on their destinations. Somewhere below, someone was probably falling. Somewhere below, someone was probably choosing whether to stop. Derek hoped they would stop. He hoped they would discover what he had learned. That in a world full of people walking past, the ones who pause are the ones who change everything. For themselves, for others, for the stranger who might turn out to be family. Rosie looked up at him, her face glowing in the evening light. "Daddy, what are you thinking about?" Derek smiled, lifting her into his arms so she could see the whole city spread out before them like a promise. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am, sweetheart. I'm thinking about how everything good in my life started with helping someone up. That's because you're kind, Daddy. I try to be. You don't have to try." She wrapped her arms around his neck, her breath warm against his ear. "You just are." And standing there on top of a building he had helped create, surrounded by people who had become his family, Derek Callahan finally allowed himself to believe it.